Hello and welcome back to Doctor Who The Cancelled Chronicles. Today we will be taking a look at the first two seasons of the 10th Doctor era. Let's get right into it. Fiona Shaw's incumbent season as the Doctor started with a bit of incident. Similar to Richard Griffiths on the set of Unit, both actors were set to play the Dursleys in the upcoming Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone adaptation. While Griffiths decided to leave the show, that proved to be impossible for Shaw as she was the headliner for Doctor Who. There were various discussions and meetings with the two companies, and they eventually worked something out for Shaw's schedule. Mainly due to her smaller role in the film, she was able to do both. While not stated before, in her post-regeneration scene and in the first few serials, she would be wearing a long-haired wig, so she would have, at first, a more feminine appearance, which would then be cut later on, showing Shaw's actual hair. Since this is pretty much the first time that the show has gotten a full reboot since the third Doctor era, Lanning and Parkin were tasked with pretty much setting up a whole new show. A new intro was commissioned along with a new logo. This time the theme was composed by David Arnold. The logo would have a more slacked down appearance and appeared to be simple with some rusted deterioration in the lettering. The intro would showcase the darkness and blackness of space with very, very deep reds and crimsons highlighting the darkness. It would mirror the era's darker tones. Fiona Shaw's face would be shown but less showcased and pronounced, and would be part of the space particles in the background before the titles pop up. The best comparison I have is Matt Smith's face in his second title sequence, only with slightly worse CGI, as well as the full theme being used similar to the 7th Doctor titles. There would be a new TARDIS interior, and it would look like the inside of an old Highland castle, with the time rotor reaching the ceiling, similar to the 7th/8th Doctor's console room. The controls would be very simplified, mainly with levers and knobs, and the controls would have a wood finish with gold trims. The console itself would look like a natural stone, but have a cleaner look to it. Not like a countertop, but something similar. The doors would look like big castle doors, and the room would have a faint reddish/orange glow. The walls would look like cracked castle walls, where behind the cracks and holes you would see the roundels, and they would look similar to stained glass windows, having the most similarity to the 5th Doctor TARDIS roundels. It would definitely be bigger than the previous TARDIS console rooms, but not quite as big as the New Who console room we got in our universe. This picture is the absolute closest I could find of what would actually be showcased, but it wouldn't be exactly like this. Fiona Shaw's Doctor would be very different from other Doctors, due to her previous incarnation dying of old age, not having a companion present, and reaching her 10th incarnation, she started to realize her own mortality and had a traumatic regeneration. Most of her incarnations are gone. She only has 3 more bodies after this until she is permanently dead. On top of this, she is a woman now, so that is uncharted territory. She doesn't know how different this incarnation will be, so that feeds into this as well. Then the events of her post-regeneration story, which we'll get to soon, cause her to power through her post-regenerative state, not letting her body rest and relax properly, also feeds into her new personality, which is that she is a very bitter and angry Doctor. She's quick to judge, she's harsh to the people around her, and she has a short fuse. She can also be judgmental of humanity when they do something stupid. The reason that Parkin wrote her this way is that he thought people would suspect her to be a softer/kinder portrayal because she's a woman, when that is not always the case. However, at the end of the day, she would still be the Doctor, saving the day and exploring the universe, and enjoying doing that, but she would just have a lot of inner demons that would need to get sorted throughout her incarnation. Then this era would be exceptionally dark, just like this Doctor. There wouldn't be a favoring towards Earth stories, space stories, or time stories, but they would all just be darker in tone and showcasing this very, very dark side of the Doctor Who universe. Finally, the companions and the first season. Parkin always had a liking for Jamie McCrimmon, and how he stayed with his Doctor through thick and thin until the end. A Highlander clearly from his time, would be a tried and true friend of the Doctor. Parkin wanted a modernization of that, and that is what our main companion would be for the entirety of this era, who would be played by Cillian Murphy, as well as a second companion to fit sort of the Zoe Harriott role, but would be an alien rather than a human from a far-off future, played by Thora Birch. The first time an American has played a companion. Due to ratings rising in America, this would be done to help raise those numbers further. The first season would have 24 episodes over the course of 9 serials. Parkin wanted an almost 3-act structure for this season, with the first 3 serials are of getting to know this Doctor, the next 3 serials are a big changing point in this incarnation's life, and the final 3 would be picking up the pieces of that fallout. With this, let's get started. The first story is The War to End All Wars, written by Mark Gatiss. During her post-regenerative state, the Doctor materializes during World War I, aka the War to End All Wars. Now a woman, reaching the double-digit incarnation and the cause of regeneration, questioning her own mortality, she is born into conflict and forces through her post-regenerative state. Doing all of this during one of the bloodiest battles in human history, the Battle of the Somme. While there would be a bit of a loose end to tie up with the last serial, it wouldn't take too much time. It would pretty much begin with the Doctor getting the last bit of people out of the TARDIS and shutting the doors. The Doctor starts to feel some pain. She expels some regeneration energy. She tries to control herself and tries to get a grapple for the controls of the TARDIS, but then it starts to crash and everything goes topsy-turvy. She eventually crash lands on an empty battlefield with the TARDIS sideways. She manages to crawl out of the TARDIS and onto the battlefield. She's in the middle of no man's land and there's tons of gunfire, explosions, and violence. The TARDIS then dematerializes away from the danger. It's in the first episode that the Doctor finds a dying man and vows to get him to safety, a man named Philip Chandler. Throughout the rest of the story, it's very much like an old school First Doctor story, with the Doctor and Philip trying to get back to the TARDIS, but with everything getting in the way. Philip's superiors, the Doctor being unable to get a telepathic connection to the TARDIS, double crosses and betrayals, dealing with the other side soldiers, and what have you. A subplot would be the Doctor having post-regen jitters, but having to shove them down because of her predicament. Both she and Chandler manage to find the TARDIS, and the Doctor thanks him for his help and starts to walk into the TARDIS. But Philip is somewhat angry that he almost died for a phone box. The Doctor smiles and says to wait a moment, and that she needs to dress for her new body. She walks in for a couple of minutes, and then the doors open on their own. He walks in and has the typical it's bigger on the inside ordeal. We see the new TARDIS interior here and the Doctor's new outfit. It's a burgundy Oxford shirt with a suede brown jacket, a long loose purple skirt that reaches her ankles, and then black witch boots. She asks if he wants a real adventure, and he says yes. She then pulls a lever on the TARDIS, and the serial ends. The story would have received a lot of praise. Many loved Fiona Shaw's Doctor in the story, and her chemistry with Philip Chandler, as well as the darker tones and the First Doctor-like feel to the whole thing. The second story is The Fugitives, written by Peter Jukes. A couple is running from the law when they bump into the Doctor and Philip, who turn them in. It turns out the woman was pregnant and she was trying to save her baby. Now the Doctor and Philip must track them down and rescue them. This would very much be a bare-bones story. It would take place in a primitive urban setting with a very loose idea of a society. Here, the Doctor is showing Philip around, and he is in amazement just on the grounds of being in a different location. They are going through some back alleys where they come across the couple, and due to seeing their posters and faces all over town, Philip urges the Doctor to turn them in due to being quote-unquote bad people, and the Doctor doesn't question it and does so. When they're about to leave the planet, they find out from one of the police officers that the woman was in fact pregnant, and while they did commit the crime they were accused of, they just did it to save their baby. The Doctor thinks it over, and this motherly instinct sort of kicks in, and she decides to save them. There is a suspenseful sequence breaking them out of prison, and then they are all on the run and can't get back to the TARDIS. So, the couple, named Jaren and Skreya, use their skills of being on the streets as well as the Doctor's quick thinking to get them out of their situation. They eventually flee to safety, and the Doctor apologizes for turning them in. They eventually sneak back into town and find the TARDIS and leave. The story would have been considered favorable, with the themes, parts of the story, the setting, and some character moments were praised. Some felt that it was too bare bones and didn't feel Doctor Who-y enough, as well as some repetitive story beats of trying to find the TARDIS again. The third story is Twisted Web, written by Nicholas Briggs. On a far-off world, there was meant to be a catastrophic event, but due to the actions of an unknown source, the events were wiped from history. The Doctor must decide to further interfere with the web of time and set it right with disastrous consequences, or leave things as they are in the web of time getting further and further twisted. The Doctor and Philip land on an alien planet and find the planet to be way too overpopulated. The Doctor soon deduces that a catastrophic event in the planet's past was supposed to happen, but because of something, the catastrophic event was diverted. Now the Doctor and Philip have a moral quandary. Do they go back in time to figure out what happened and have history take its course, or do they leave and have the planet border on apocalypse because this event didn't happen? They decide on the former, even if the Doctor is very hesitant. The Doctor is already seeing the effects of the timeline when they try to use the TARDIS and they struggle going back in time to the planet's past. They befriend a young woman named Aruna, and with her help they explore the planet with the Doctor's knowledge of the event without actually showcasing it to her to keep a history intact. They eventually find out that someone got a premonition of the event and they took the necessary steps to stop it from happening. Now we go back to the moral question. Does the Doctor save all these people but risk the future of overpopulation, or does the Doctor let history take its course? Eventually, in the final episode, the Doctor decides the latter, and this event on the planet kills thousands upon thousands of people, which includes the entirety of Aruna's family. Taking pity on the girl, she invites her into the TARDIS, but she swears Philip to secrecy because she doesn't know what will happen if Aruna finds out what happened to her family. They have the same bigger on the inside bit once again, and they fly off for another adventure. However, we see that the Doctor is clearly shaken and angry about the whole ordeal. The story would have received a lot of praise. Many liked the darker themes in dealing with the morality of certain decisions. Shaw's performance was highlighted, as well as the overall dark story. However, some criticized it as too dark for Doctor Who. The fourth story is Allies of the Daleks, written by Lance Parkin. The Daleks are at it again, and this time trying to destroy a genocidal race who actually want to help the Daleks. But so does the Doctor. What have the Sagaroks done to warrant this, and why is the Doctor so eager to help her most nefarious foe? So this would have been a very controversial story. It would have had the Doctor actually teaming up with the Daleks. So in the story there is a race called the Sagaroks who are falling into the pitfalls of what the Daleks are. Genocidal maniacs who want to rule the universe. It doesn't help that they worship the Daleks almost as deities. The Doctor sees that they will pretty much become another race of Daleks. The Doctor tries to understand them better, and she soon realizes that they are simply psychotic and possibly even worse than the Daleks. Eventually, the Daleks do enter the picture, and the Sagaroks are trying to communicate with them and help them because they want to be just like them. But the Daleks aren't having it and start to exterminate. However, the Sagaroks are a powerful race, and the Daleks, while they do a good amount of damage, are almost no match for them. In the cliffhanger of the first episode, the Doctor offers to help them destroy the Sagaroks. Pretty much the rest of the story would be the Doctor allying herself with the Daleks to bring down the Sagaroks and eventually commit Sagarok genocide. In the second half of the last episode, the Daleks try to betray the Doctor after defeating them, but she soon does away with them easily. Eventually, the Doctor and her companions get back to the TARDIS when they see someone in the TARDIS. The Doctor begins asking who they are, and they simply say, "Doctor, you are under arrest for crimes against Gallifrey and Time Lord law. You must come with us." Smash cut to the Doctor's face, and the story ends. The story would have received massive negative reception from fans. Many hated that the Doctor not only allied herself with the Daleks, but committed genocide against another race while doing so. Apparently, many fans dropped off the show because of this. The fifth story is White Room, written by Jacqueline Rayner. After the events of the previous serial, the Doctor is arrested and put on trial by the Time Lords, again, for helping the Daleks commit genocide against the Sagaroks. The Doctor tries to defend her actions, but realizes she may have gone too far. So, the serial starts off with the Doctor landing on Gallifrey. Philip and Aruna are taken away from the Doctor, and the Doctor is taken to a holding cell, a White Room, where she is soon greeted by Romana. They chat for a bit, with Romana stating how much she likes this new body and such. And then it gets starkly more serious when Romana begins talking to the Doctor about her actions, stating that she needs to plead guilty to really think about what she has committed. The Doctor states that she knows what she has done. She stopped another race hell-bent on making the universe their hunting grounds for no reason. She stopped a race from killing men, women, and children for the fun of it, that she felt the need to do so. Romana states it's an atrocity, but then the Doctor explains it wasn't an atrocity when it was supposed to happen on Aruna's home planet, that she had to commit that and it was fine. Romana says that it was supposed to happen and that the web of time could not be risked. The Doctor says the Sagarok were going to die off eventually anyway, but she did it before any lives were truly lost. Romana says that she has gone too far and she doesn't even recognize her anymore, and she leaves. But before doing so, she says that someone else is here to see her. Then, Leela enters the room with what looks like a ceremonial outsider outfit. They greet each other, and they catch up. But then, once again, it gets serious, and they have a conversation about what happened, with the Doctor just stating her defense again. But Leela, now a slightly changed woman, states that the Doctor wouldn't have done this, that they wouldn't have chosen violence like this. The Doctor says, I suppose you're right, and then Leela leaves by herself. There are a few minutes of contemplation when the Doctor is asked to come into the courtroom. In the final moments of the episode, the Doctor pleads, not guilty. The next 2 episodes are simply a courtroom drama with the Doctor going back and forth to the White Room to gather her thoughts properly and have a proper defense, but every time that she thinks she can properly defend her actions, every time she goes back to the room, she slowly starts to realize more and more that what she has done is wrong, and by the end of the story breaks down. She talks to Philip and Aruna about what she did before she goes into the courtroom one final time. She eventually pleads guilty and options for a self-imposed exile in her TARDIS until she properly atones for what she has done. She eventually gets the Time Lords to agree to this, and she reunites with her companions, and they all enter the TARDIS. However, she soon realizes that they will be stuck in the TARDIS with her for her exile, and they are then sent into the time vortex with no way of getting out. The story would have been considered favorable. While many respected the idea of the Doctor realizing what she did was wrong, many felt it was too out of character for the Doctor anyway, and still didn't like where the series was going. However, many liked seeing Romana and Leela once again, and thought that the story was intriguing. The 6th story is Exiled, written by Justin Richards. The Doctor imposes herself to exile, no longer wanting to get involved in the pitfalls of other races due to her actions. It's only through her wandering of the TARDIS and her companions does she realize she has a bit of hope left. This would have been a bottle story where it takes place entirely in the TARDIS, with the Doctor wandering around the TARDIS feeling intense amounts of guilt for her actions. There is a subplot with Aruna and Philip, with the former wanting to get out and go home, while the latter wants to stay and help the Doctor. Eventually, in the cliffhanger of the first episode, the companions both decide to help the Doctor, and the Doctor stumbles upon a room that she thought had been jettisoned a long time ago. The second episode is the companions trying to find the Doctor and help her get through her troubles, while the Doctor enters the room, and it is a room dedicated to her companions. Here we see every companion, ranging from Katarina to Sarah Jane, and everyone in between. She claims that she disappointed them, that she did one of the worst possible things that she could have done, that she deserves this, especially when she sees the companions who lost their lives to help her. Her current companions eventually find her and they converse about what it means to be the Doctor and to help them. That the Doctor isn't a hero, but that's okay, and that she is something entirely different. It's through this conversation that the Doctor realizes what she is, but decides to stay in exile to atone for her sins, as it's the right thing to do. This goes on for months, with the companions not appearing any older, and the Doctor continually wandering the TARDIS. Eventually, the Doctor feels ready to leave, but when she does so, the TARDIS doesn't work. It's still stuck in the time vortex. She realizes what the Time Lords have done, permanently stuck her in the time vortex, rather than just for a limited amount of time. In the final moments of the episode, she manages to find a loophole and gets out of the time vortex. She tells Philip and Aruna that she will try to be better no matter what, and that they might need some relaxation after this exile. The story was considered favorable. Some felt it was a bit too boring, even if it followed the consequences of the Doctor's actions in Allies of the Daleks. However, others felt that it was a good examination of who the Doctor is, despite not focusing on that too much. The Doctor, Aruna, and Philip go to the leisure planet of Midnight for a simple, relaxing holiday. However, life with the Doctor can never be that simple, and things go horribly wrong for the Doctor when she decides to go off on a bus trip to see the Sapphire Waterfall, starting with the bus shutting down. When a mysterious entity infiltrates the shuttle bus, no one is to be trusted, not even the Doctor herself. This would have been an adaptation of the story of the same name. Some things would be tweaked, like some of the actors would be different, and the small tease towards the Stolen Earth / Journey's End would obviously be removed. However, outside of this, the story would pretty much stay the same. The story would have received tons and tons of praise and considered the best story of the season. Many liked how, despite being dark, it held more true to the Doctor's personality than the last few stories, but also fed into her story arc this season, while also feeling a bit more episodic comparatively. The 8th story is Abandon All Hope, written by David A. McGinty. The Doctor and company land on a world that checks off every horrible societal impact in the book: poverty, famine, destroyed economy, rampant crime, genocide, etc. The Doctor gets angrier and angrier at the sight of the world, only to realize it's a test by a familiar face. The TARDIS lands on a desolate world that is barely even a functioning world. Every single solitary thing that could negatively impact society, economy, and the world itself are present here. The Doctor tries to help the best she can, but nothing she is doing can help the world. She begins to break down and starts to realize that nothing she can do can save people. She wonders what's even the point, until Aruna comes in and helps her come back to reality and states that the Doctor gave her purpose after what happened to her family. She starts to come around until she hears a familiar voice that says, "With what you did, Doctor, I needed to know what your limits were, and I needed to help you." She then turns to see the Master, and the episode ends. The next episode would involve the Doctor going into a blind rage and almost killing the Master, but he teleports the both of them away to safety. He states that he had the TARDIS dragged here to witness what this world became. The Doctor asks if he had a hand in its hardship. The Master states some parts, but most of it was their own doing. He wanted to see how far she would really go. The Sagaroks are gone because of her. The Daleks were an ally. The Master surprisingly reprimands her. The Doctor brings up the events of Turning Point/Judgment Day, but the Master states that that was just a bit of fun. This is serious and real. The Master never actually wanted to see the Doctor become whatever this is. The Doctor claims it's this regeneration. It's Nessie. But of course, the conversation eventually leads to the Master trying to get the Doctor to join him and rule the universe, like always. But the Doctor realized afterwards that what she did was a mistake. She will never want to rule the universe. The Master takes the Doctor back to the world, far off into the future, where he does rule it, and he tries to get the Doctor to join him again. It's a verbal sparring back and forth. Eventually, the Doctor steals the Master's TARDIS and gets back to where she was left originally. She takes Aruna and Philip with her, and they decide to fix the planet no matter what, undoing whatever the Master did, but also helping out at certain points in time. Eventually, the world is prosperous, and the Doctor and company leave. Aruna asks what happened to the Master, and the Doctor states that she left a present for him, wherever he is. It turns out the Doctor did manipulate events to make sure people knew that the Master tried to destroy this world. It cuts back to the future where the people take down the Master, and he screams for the Doctor's help. This story would have been considered mixed. While some liked seeing the Master again, the Doctor feeling the consequences for her actions again, and some bits of the story, some felt that it was a bit too morality heavy, as well as having a lot of dull points in the story. The 9th and final story is The Betrayed, written by Mark Platt. Aruna finds out that the Doctor enacted the events that caused the catastrophe that killed her family. Not only does she leave the TARDIS, but she tries to ruin the Doctor's life permanently. After various adventures, the Doctor, Philip, and Aruna enter the TARDIS in a very happy state. The Doctor is glad that the last few adventures have lifted their spirits up, but Aruna gets serious for a moment and states that despite being happy with the Doctor and loves traveling, she feels a bit homesick. The Doctor then smiles and sets a course for her homeworld. They land, and the Doctor and Philip let Aruna do whatever she needs to do on the planet. Philip and the Doctor peruse and relax for a bit when Philip starts to ask if Aruna would ever find out about what happened, and the Doctor says no, and that is the end of that. It cuts to Aruna, who visits the memorial, which features the names of her parents and siblings. Then she decides to visit some friends for a bit. Then she gets visited by a family friend who happens to be the man who got the premonition of the event. They talk, and he soon reveals what happened, how he got the premonition of the event, but couldn't do anything about it because of someone named the Doctor. He wanted to tell her so many times, but couldn't bring himself to do it. The episode ends with Aruna seeing the Doctor and has a look of anger on her face. The next episode begins with the company going back into the TARDIS. The Doctor tries to ask Aruna about her time spent on the planet, but Aruna is silent. They enter the time vortex, and she pulls a knife on Philip. She tells the Doctor that she knows what happened and tells her to reverse it. She states that she can't and tries to explain the web of time. Aruna isn't having it and forces the Doctor to do so, or she will slit Philip's throat. The Doctor manages to eventually pull Aruna away from Philip and uses some Venusian Aikido to knock her out. She tells Philip to tie her up, and he does so. But she eventually escapes and finds a vortex manipulator in the TARDIS, and she tells the Doctor that if she won't save her species, then she will get her revenge. And she disappears. The rest of the story is Aruna going back in time and killing every companion/person the Doctor has ever cared about, with the Doctor getting all sorts of alternate timelines on what could have happened, as well as her body getting stretched into all sorts of directions because there were certain points where companions saved the Doctor's life. So the Doctor and Philip have to go and stop her. They manage to trek across time, and they eventually find her before she does anything. Philip wrestles the vortex manipulator off her and gives it to the Doctor. The Doctor tries to reason with her, but she isn't having it. She explains that her planet would have been in a worse condition and the entire timeline would unravel if it didn't happen. Aruna states that she doesn't care and she wants her family back. The Doctor says, "I know, and I so desperately wish I could give them to you, but I can't." Aruna screams that she betrayed the Time Lords once before with the Sagaroks, and she can do it again. The Doctor says she can't. Then Aruna will have her revenge no matter what. The Doctor realizes what she must do. They all go into the TARDIS and it dematerializes. It rematerializes on a desolate planet, and she throws Aruna out of the TARDIS and gives her a small wooden box of resources to last a month. After that, who knows? And the Doctor leaves her there as the TARDIS dematerializes. Aruna is seen crying and screaming for the Doctor. The Doctor and Philip then sit by the TARDIS console, ashamed and defeated, while Philip tries to comfort her the best he can. The story would have been somewhat negatively received. While many thought that a companion wanting revenge on the Doctor was a neat idea, the story ran too long and had the Doctor acting out of character again. Season 38 would have been a rather mixed season of Doctor Who. While some liked the idea of the experimentation aspect, as well as the various stories, many did not like the Doctor allying herself with the Daleks or leaving a companion to die. While she got the proper repercussions for her actions, they still didn't like it, and many fans fell off the show and ratings went down. It also didn't help that the season had to be delayed due to 9/11. The BBC was running damage control and was worried that the worst was going to happen once again, like with the show in the 80s, of almost getting cancelled. So they urged Parkin and Lanning to tone the show down and make the Doctor less cruel and more in character. Since they had the Doctor learning over her incarnation, they had already planned to do this anyway, so nothing really changed from their point of view. Also, another companion was going to be added to the TARDIS team, this time a psychiatrist who was going to help the Doctor with her demons, played by Emily Watson. The intro would have gotten a little lighter with more of a light red/orange tone to it. Oh, and the story count would go from 9 to 10. The first story is The Marian Conspiracy, written by Jacqueline Rayner. Tracking a nexus point in time, the Doctor meets Dr. Corey Foster, a psychiatrist whose own history seems to be rapidly vanishing. The Doctor must travel back to Tudor times to stabilize the nexus and save Corey's life, but there she meets the Queen of England and must use all her skills of diplomacy to avoid ending up on the headsman's block. This would have been an adaptation of the Big Finish story of the same name, with some amount of tweaks. This time, as I stated, she would be a psychiatrist rather than a history professor. However, she studies history as a hobby so that she is aware of her history, like Evelyn Smythe was in the original story. However, outside of that, little changes. However, the ending will be slightly changed, with the Doctor now walking with Corey as a psychiatrist to help her sort out whatever is going on with this regeneration. The story would have been universally acclaimed. A great historical with impressive dialogue, great chemistry between the new TARDIS crew, and an intriguing story with colorful characters. While some still weren't totally sure if this Doctor could dig herself out of the hole she left herself, it was still an impressive start to the season. The second story is The Land That Time Remembers, written by Stephen Moffat. The Doctor, Corey, and Philip land on a world where everything is regimented. Work, meals, play, sleep. Everything is on a curfew. When someone deviates from curfew, they are killed by an unknown being. The Doctor and company must get to the bottom of this before everything goes haywire. So this would be a very weird story. The Doctor and company land on this world and it is regimented in everything. Where to go, what to do, how to work, how to play, and what to eat. Everything. The Doctor is somewhat curious about this world, so she decides to stay. During the nighttime, someone is walking the streets and they accidentally go into the wrong store. They start freaking out and the Doctor goes to see what the commotion is. The man then starts screaming and he starts to slowly get vaporized until there is nothing left of him, and the only other thing around is something that is covered with a dark gray sheet. The first episode would be the Doctor and company trying to find this being who is never seen on screen. The second episode would reveal that it is thought to be the physical manifestation of the web of time under this dark gray sheet. It is described as this mass of unexplainable things, sort of Lovecraftian, and it's never shown properly because of this. It is revealed that the dictator of this world, named Mr. Non, was a scientist who never got any respect and was deemed a crackpot. Well, one day this scientist used an invention, which was a time machine and managed to somehow capture this strange ethereal being. The scientist managed to control it and use it for his own needs. He claims it spoke to him about different aspects of time and what it is and what it could be. The Doctor then sees it and realizes that it is something beyond the timeline. It looks like something that is beyond the end of time, something that somehow managed to exist. The Doctor then frees it, and it manages to kill Mr. Non for trying to control it. The Doctor tries to ask it questions, but it cannot communicate with such simple terms, whether that be language or telepathy. Mr. Non only claimed it was communicating with them, but didn't actually. It then simply disappears, and the team goes back to the TARDIS, wondering how all of this managed to happen. The Doctor's theory is that a TARDIS core somehow lived beyond the edge of time and evolved. The story would have been considered favorable. While some liked the grounded aspects mixed with the high-concept ideas, some considered it to be way too confusing for its own good. The third story is The Sandman, written by Simon A. Forward. The Clutch is a fleet in constant motion, ships jostling for position, in an endless migration between the stars. For the Galliari, forbidden by an ancient curse from settling on a world ever again, the Clutch is home. But the curse travels with them. The Sandman, a figure of myth and folklore, preys on the young and old alike. He lurks in the shadows, and it is death to look upon him. All too soon after the TARDIS arrives, it is evident that the Doctor and the Galliari share a dark history, and Corey and Philip are shocked to discover that, on the Clutch, it is their friend who is the monster. The Sandman, according to the tales, also goes by the name of the Doctor. This would have adapted the Big Finish story, and it would have remained pretty much the same. The story would have received mixed to negative reception. While some liked the premise and some of its ideas, the story doesn't reach the heights it could have, and it ends up falling flat. The fourth story is The Glaring God, written by David A. McKinty. The Doctor and company land on a world where they worship a strange god, and it is a face that the Doctor very much recognizes. But how did this happen? What happened to the history of this peace-loving planet? Why do they worship the Master? This would have been a very different Master story. It's revealed that he did in fact survive what happened to him in Abandon All Hope, just like always. This is essentially a picking up the pieces serial of what happens with the Master when the Doctor is not around. It broadens the scope of the universe and what happens when the Master is left unchecked. He shaped a world's history into becoming a god to them, similar to his actions in Abandon All Hope. But this time he is successful and had no Doctor to interfere. The Master made assurances that the Doctor could not change the past to what the original history was by making the timeline ironclad with not one or two fixed points in time, but three. So no matter what the Doctor does, she cannot change history. It shows the power of the Master and how intelligent he is. Despite the Doctor's multiple attempts to try and change the present, no matter what they do, they will always worship the Master as a deity. With this, the Doctor and company leave, very defeated. The story would have received a good amount of praise. Many liked seeing the broader scope of the Master's activities outside of his interactions with the Doctor and how those can really shape an innocent world. It felt like an episode too long, though. The fifth story is Lanyon Moor, written by Nicholas Pegg. In a desolate Cornish landscape littered with relics of prehistoric man, the Doctor, Corey, and Philip uncover a catalog of mysteries. What is the secret of Fogu? Can the moor be haunted by a demonic host of imps? And what is Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart doing in Pengriffin? Teaming up with her old friend, the Doctor realizes that an ancient conflict is nearing its conclusion and Lanyon Moor is set to be the final battleground. This would have adapted the Big Finish story, The Spectre of Lanyon Moor, and it still would have featured the Brigadier. The story would have received a lot of praise. Many liked seeing the Brigadier again and liked his chemistry with Shaw. The chemistry between everyone was praised. It felt like an old Doctor Who tale, had a spooky vibe to the whole thing, and was an overall delight from start to finish. The sixth story is My Walking Shadow, written by Lance Parkin. Screaming, bombs, gunfire, nothingness. Philip Chandler is having terrible dreams. The Doctor thinks the worst and tries to help, but she only makes things worse. He's lashing out, angry and disturbed. Little do they know, a being looms over him, a shadow that is only going to get worse and worse. On the surface, this would have been a story that started with Philip having terrible dreams about the war. He tries to hide it from the Doctor and Corey at first, but when he becomes more and more emotional when it comes to certain things, they both realize what's happening. The Doctor tries to help him, but he lashes out at the Doctor, saying that she only makes things worse, and that she can never redeem herself for the things she has done. He then leaves to wander the TARDIS. Corey and the Doctor try to find him, but going through the TARDIS, Philip begins to have flashbacks to the war, with one such flashback witnessing a friend of his get brutally murdered in front of him. It isn't shown due to the brutality of it, we just see Philip's reaction. Through Philip's wandering of the TARDIS, it's implied that the source of the flashbacks are of unknown origin. We don't know if it is Philip's PTSD technology within the TARDIS or something else. The subplot would be Corey and the Doctor talking about her actions before Corey got on the TARDIS, and how she hasn't mentioned those things in their sessions. In the cliffhanger of the episode, it's revealed that a being had latched onto Philip, and that it accentuated his fear in the experiences of the war. In the second episode, the Doctor and Corey eventually find him, and the former figures out what is happening to Philip and the cause of this is. The rest of the episode is pretty much getting the being off of him, and through some technological means, the Doctor gets it off Philip and it expels it from the TARDIS. In the final moments of the episode, Philip explains that these experiences are very real to him. They were just very buried and he doesn't know what to do. The Doctor states that she will help whatever he needs help with, along with Corey. Philip states that he just wants to be alone for the time being, and the Doctor lets him be. Corey then tells the Doctor that she has to speak with her. She explains that after today, she might have to leave the TARDIS. The story would have received massive amounts of acclaim. Many thought that showcasing the idea of PTSD was done in a very healthy way that wasn't offensive or mean, but also worked in the context of Doctor Who and tried to show that there isn't a magic cure for it. It was considered one of the best stories of the era. The seventh story is Arrangements for War, written by Paul Sutton. On board the TARDIS, nerves are strained. After dealing with Philip's PTSD and the being that latched onto that, the Doctor and Corey have things to talk about. The Doctor's attitude towards death is a subject that these days is too close to Corey's heart, and eventually she demands to be set down somewhere where she can be free of her for a while. And so they come to Valag, where the Doctor's meddling lands her in the middle of a truly dangerous liaison, and Corey meets a man who wants to change the course of her life forever. Love is everywhere, but then war is too. Is it time for Corey to leave the Doctor, or is the choice about being taken out of her hands? And who is to say what is the beginning and what is the end of love? This would have adapted the Big Finish story with the necessary amount of tweaks. This story would have received a lot of acclaim. It had some great aspects in regards to Corey's and the Doctor's characterization, a brilliant plot, how companions are affected by traveling with the Doctor, and some decent political commentary. The eighth story is The Downfall, written by Jonathan Blum. In the late 1880s, the Doctor and company meet an outspoken and rebellious young man who wants nothing but to improve his country and progress it from its archaic traditions. The Doctor takes a liking to the young man and decides to help him, but then she learns that he is Franz Ferdinand, whose assassination would cause World War I. While the last story would have focused on Corey's aftermath of My Walking Shadow, this would essentially be Philip's aftermath. It is essentially a dealing with fixed points in time episode where the Doctor discovers young Franz Ferdinand being rebellious against his country's regime at the time and taking a liking to him and helping out, not realizing who it is due to landing in the wrong time than thought originally. It would at first be the Doctor trying to avoid telling Philip who it is because of everything that happened, but it unfortunately gets revealed in the final moments of the first episode. The second episode, of course, revolves around Philip wanting to change history, obviously. But the Doctor tries to give him many examples of his time in the TARDIS where they can't do that because of fixed points in time. Philip knows of this, but still tries little ways of letting Ferdinand know of what will happen to him, but all of it is for naught, obviously. They help him with whatever he needs help with in history at that point, and then they leave in the TARDIS, with Philip being very disappointed of what's happened, but he talks to the Doctor and Corey about it. The story would have received a lot of praise. While the episode doesn't do anything incredibly new with its main premise, the fact that it deals with the specific characters at this point in time makes it a worthwhile episode, as well as the intriguing story of a young Ferdinand and a point in history that isn't really discussed all that much. The ninth story is A Tickle in the Grass, written by Clayton Hickman. The TARDIS lands in a large field where there is nothing as far as the eye can see except freshly cut grass. When the Doctor and company try to explore, they seem to be ruining the freshly cut lawn, and some beings that cannot be seen to the naked eye are very unhappy about that. This would have been the season's silly story. The Doctor and company land on a world that is only grass because it turns out near microscopic beings had invaded the world and only want to have perfectly shaped and cut grass. The Doctor and company try to get off the planet, but the beings, named Quetzalians, want them to pay for their crimes, which is mowing the lawn of the entire planet. Well, the Doctor agrees. It takes a while, but they manage to cut the grass to their specifications, leaving the Quetzalians happy, and they eventually leave. The story would have been considered funny. While not a great episode, it was necessary after the 3 very dark stories, and many liked the light fun of it, as well as the jokes hitting their mark and showcasing Shaw's comedy chops. The 10th story is The Happiest Ending, written by Christopher Bulis. The Doctor is on Gallifrey. She looks like her first incarnation and is living a relatively charming life as a Time Lord scientist. Wait, this isn't right. Why isn't this right? This would have essentially been the alternate history story, with the best comparison I can give it is the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Tapestry and the Batman the Animated Series episode Perchance to Dream. The Doctor wakes up on Gallifrey, no companions or TARDIS in sight. They are living a rather mundane life. Nothing exciting, very boring, just living a typical day-to-day life. But there is sort of this weird comfort in that. Susan is nowhere to be found, same with the Doctor's actual children. The Doctor does not look like their 10th incarnation. Here, they look like their original incarnation, this time played by David Bradley. The first episode would essentially be the Doctor realizing that something is off throughout their life here, and at the end of the episode, waking up strapped to a table. The next episode sees the Doctor escaping and trying to find Corey and Philip, but cannot find them. But she does find the Ronnie. She did all this to siphon her regeneration energy, as well as figure out what went wrong with her regeneration. She had been watching her and saw how badly her regeneration had become, so she wanted to see how this regeneration was different from others, while also trying to get a bit of something for herself and the Miasmagoria natives. There is a bit of a scuffle, and the Doctor gets the Ronnie to reveal where Corey and Philip are. Cut to them, there's a bit of a back and forth between their fantasies. Corey's fantasy is getting some sort of award for humanitarian work, while Philip is actually on board the TARDIS, having an adventure with the Doctor alone. Speaking of, she eventually finds them and releases them. The Doctor decides to just leave the Ronnie be, despite what she's doing, because handing her over to the Time Lords is a fate worse than death. They eventually leave in the TARDIS. The story would have been considered good. While the whole story was praised, many preferred the first part of the story, similar to the 9th Doctor story, The Frozen Planet. However, unlike there, the story felt more complete here, and many liked seeing the Ronnie again. Some didn't like the ending with the Doctor leaving her to her own devices, though. Season 39 would have been better reviewed and more liked than the previous season, and the Doctor started to act more like the Doctor after the events of Allies of the Daleks. Corey Foster was a well-liked companion, however, it was announced that she would be leaving at the end of Season 40. Shaw and Murphy would be staying on for the time being. Speaking of Season 40, it was announced that it was going to end with a very epic 40th anniversary special and the season to be more in tune with previous Doctors and their eras. But that is all for today. Next month, we will be taking a look at the next mini-series of Jago and Lightfoot, as well as the final series of Unit and a special surprise. See you then.
Now your child can visit steamy jungles, grassy plains, and the dark depths of the oceans to meet and learn surprising facts about the magnificent animals that live there, all through the captivating, colorful pages of Zoo Books. The publication is specially created for young readers. Each monthly issue of Zoo Books is packed with breathtaking full-color photos and scientifically accurate illustrations, plus games and puzzles. Today, through this exclusive TV offer, you can get 12 fascinating issues of Zoo Books for the special price of $19.95.